Hello and welcome to this edition of CityVision. I'm Mark Murray. Today I'm at the Kettering Health Network's newest facility in downtown Hamilton. And we're going to do a health update. My guest today is Kay Farrar, the city's health commissioner. And we're going to get an update on what's going on in the health division. And because this is No Shave November, we're also going to talk a little bit about men's health and explain a little bit about why my hair looks a little different than what you've seen in the past. Come on in, we'll talk. Hi Kay, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You know, you realize you're probably one of my most frequent guests now.
I get that. I don't know how that happens.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in the health division. Let's talk about I think we're going to talk about food. So what's health's role in the protection of our food?
Well, health licenses and inspects all of our food service operations within the city of Hamilton. That would include retail food establishments, which a lot of people don't quite understand that that's a part of food. So even water in the state of Ohio is considered a food. So if you are a little mom and pop gas station and you're selling water and pop and chips, you are licensed by the health division and inspected by them.
All right. So, but what determines the licensing level?
Well, it starts with what type of food preparation is going on there. It's also based upon the size of the facility. So basically, certain foods have a higher risk associated with them, such as sushi would be a very high risk because it's something that is not cooked. And so it's very critical how that food is handled, how it's prepared, and then how it's stored before it's sold, because there's a lot of areas where it could become an issue for people to eat.
Now, who's writing the laws governing the licensing and inspections? Is that local, City of Hamilton? Is it state?
It's
federal?
It is state.
Okay.
Every state has their own uniform food safety codes, so the state of Ohio has their own. It references the federal code and federal regulations, so there are references there, but it truly is written by the state of Ohio.
Okay, well, how are the fees set?
Fees are set, again, by that food preparation and the size of the facility. So there's basically level 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And so depending upon what you are serving or preparing or giving out as food tells its risk level. So if you're just that place where you sell chips and pop and water and maybe beer, that is a lower risk level. So they would be a risk level 1. Those don't need to be inspected as often, maybe just once a year. But as you go up that level, those get inspected more often. So obviously the fee is higher for a higher risk level, because we go out and inspect those facilities more often.
Okay, now what does an inspection look like? I mean, are these things announced? Does somebody know ahead of time that the health department's coming in?
No, they're an unannounced inspection. So basically the inspector goes into the facility. Most of the facilities here know them very well. They know them by face when they walk in that that's the inspector, because we don't change very often. So they say, uh-oh, I'm being inspected today. So then the inspector would identify someone called the person in charge, or the PIC. That person goes around with the inspector as she's writing it up. An inspection can last anywhere from an hour. It can be 4 or 5 hours.
Really?
Depending on the size of the facility.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about like Kroger's, it takes a while to go through there. They have a deli where they're serving meat and cutting it and cheese. And then they have, other refrigerated cabinets. So going through that entire facility can take a long time.
Okay.
Meanwhile, they're writing up and talking to the person in charge about any violations that they're noting. And there's levels of violations. The critical ones may need to be corrected prior to the inspector leaving if it's easily corrected. Say, for instance, there's a labeling issue. Something is out for the general public and it does not list the allergens on it. They'll say, we need you to remove this from direct sales so that people can't pull it off the shelf and serve themselves, so to speak, until the label is corrected. But otherwise, a critical violation has to be corrected within 24 hours, and the inspector goes out on the next business day.
Well, without naming any facility in particular, I mean, what would be a critical?
Labeling is a critical violation, lack of allergens on a label, because, you know, as you can imagine, if you're allergic to peanut butter and that brownie was made or handled in a facility that manufactures peanut butter, or even there's peanut butter inside of it, that could be quite a critical thing for a young child who has a peanut allergy to eat that brownie. So that's considered to be a critical violation and has to be corrected immediately. Another example of a critical violation would be if the refrigeration system wasn't maintaining the temperature. In a food service operation, in all food service operations, including retail food establishments, you have to have commercial type equipment, because our refrigerators in our own homes go through defrost cycles. So the fan will be on, and then it'll turn off, and then it'll go back on. And that maintains your home refrigeration pretty well, because you figure the average family is 4. The refrigerator door doesn't get open, but unless you have kids and they're leaving it open all day. But you know, infrequently, except at mealtime when you're preparing. In a restaurant facility or a food service establishment, you know, the doors are opened often and frequently and for long periods of time while people kind of meander through the food and decide what they're going to have. So those commercial type refrigeration units, the fan works all the time. They're completely different functioning. If an inspector finds out that for some reason or another that the refrigeration system isn't maintaining a temp and they're holding chicken in there, for instance, I'm not trying to gross anybody out, but chicken is something that, you know, becomes bad very quickly.
Sure.
And so if that was found to be under the degrees that are required to store chicken, then that would be a critical violation.
Okay. Now, of course, you know, most of the places you go into have a lot of equipment, and what if a piece of equipment's not functioning properly?
Then health departments have an ability to red tag a piece of equipment. So if it is, say for instance, you go back to a Kroger's or that type of facility where they have a deli counter and they're actually cutting meat and those blades have teeth on them, if the inspector goes through and finds out one of the teeth is missing off of the blade, then we would do something called a red tag system. So within the city of Hamilton, I myself as health commissioner can red tag a piece of equipment. So the inspector would call me and say, I have a problem here, I need you. It's either myself or Cindy Hogg. She is the environmental administrator. She also has the capability, and that was voted upon by our Board of Health, to allow both of us to red tag. And we would actually go out to that facility that day right then and red tag it and say, you cannot use this piece of equipment until it's repaired properly. Okay,
now if you're a restaurant, I mean, can you be closed due to violations or other issues?
You can. If the violations are critical enough and they've not correcting them, again, the health commissioner has the ability to close a facility, so does the environmental administrator. So it would be a pretty hefty violation, but if it occurred, we can close them. If the store owner or the restaurant refuses to close, then the Ohio Department of Health or the Ohio Department of Agriculture, in the case of an RFE, that's who is the body that oversees those, they would come in and file an injunction, and they would close the facility.
Wow. So I want to read this here. So if someone eats at a restaurant and believe they became ill from eating there, what should they do?
It's important for people to report if they think they've become ill from eating at any place or eating anything. And that includes their own home-cooked stuff. We find, there are food recalls all the time. Sometimes they are things that are bought in the grocery store. They were processes that failed in the manufacturing of the food, or getting it to the shelf. There was a problem with the temperature. It fell out of range. And most people remember when there were recalls of such things as spinach. We had an E. coli outbreak associated with spinach.
Yeah.
And it was across the board. It's not the restaurant. It was in that process of growing the spinach that actually created the recall.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really important that people, when they believe they've become ill because they've eaten something, and that's usually a GI illness, it's usually vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps. Those are the typical very red flags that you could have had a food poisoning. It's very important to report that to your local Board of Health. So within the city of Hamilton, we serve only those restaurants and facilities that are actually within our borders. If it's outside of our corporation limits and it's in, say, for instance, Bridgewater Falls, that would be Butler County Health Department.
Okay.
And if it's within the city of Middletown, they have their own health department as well. So
Okay.
it would get reported
It's good to know.
to them. Now, I always caution people, I think people when they become ill after they've eaten a food, they always assume that it was the last thing they ate. And that's a good assumption because, again, I'm not trying to gross people out, but that's usually what comes up if you vomit. That is not always the item that actually made you sick. It could be something that you ate even a week ago. Certain food histories are taken by the nursing staff when someone calls in. We want to go back about 7 days and find out what you've eaten for 7 days. That's hard for people, but it's an important piece of the puzzle. They also take a symptom checklist and find out what symptoms the person all had. If it's multiple people, then that becomes very critical. We do something called a line list, and we start comparing people and individuals, what they ate in the last 7 days, and try to find crossovers. You will always, when you have a foodborne outbreak, you will always have people that ate that very item and did not get sick. That's what's confusing to people. It's just our anatomy. Some people have very strong genes and they don't, for whatever reason, get sick, and others, if they eat just a small bit of that infectious agent, they get violently ill. So it's a critical piece of the process, but it's extremely important so that we can document and we share then across jurisdictional lines. We can talk with each other. We're very connected to the Ohio Department of Health. They keep statistics when we start reporting foodborne outbreaks. They get very ears open, eyes clear, and they start pushing out information to all health commissioners and saying if you have any of these same symptoms, and we actually get a case of salmonella or E. coli or something that is known to be passed in the food chain, it's critical that we try to figure out what food that is so we can take it off the shelves as quick as possible.
Okay, now I'm going to go back, and I hope I'm not catching you off guard on this, because when we talked in your office a couple weeks ago, when certain things were in the news, and without getting into some specific details, I think it's important that everybody knows that really you guys are all about protecting the public.
Absolutely. We want protection of the public. That is our first and foremost goal. That's what the Ohio Uniform Food Safety Code is about. The reason we go out and inspect facilities, and we do every day find violations, including critical violations almost every day.
Wow.
It is important to, again, continuously refresh people who serve food's mind that you are serving the public, and things that you might do in your own home, it affects only your family. If you're serving hundreds of people, including people that could be immunosuppressed or have, more difficulty fighting an illness, you want to make sure that you're serving the best and the fresh and that everything is going as planned. If you think about it, in a lot of our facilities, we have, young kids working,
yes.
and it's critical that they be trained properly in handling food and food safety. That's up to those restaurants, and when the inspectors are out, that's what they're watching too, is how are everyone handling the food when they're walking past there? Are they putting gloves on where gloves are indicated? Are they cooking things thoroughly, checking the temperature to make sure it got to the right degrees?
Right.
Those are all critical items.
What about, even things like basic hygiene, water temperature, things like that? I mean, stuff you were telling me.
Absolutely, absolutely. They even check the temperature of the dish machine. So most restaurants have dish machines. They don't do washing by hand, obviously. So they are in there checking to make sure that that dish machine can hit the proper temperature for sterilization of the plates and forks and et cetera. And it's all, again, critical to protecting everyone so that everyone can eat out, enjoy life,
Absolutely.
and not get ill.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're gonna change gears a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, because as most people know, if you've ever watched the show in the past, my hair's a little different, more of a salt and pepper look, and there's a reason for that. We've talked about it on the show before. I am trying to survive prostate cancer. I haven't yet. Got some news recently that's a little disconcerting, but I feel good. And that's, that's important. Don't know where it's going to take me in the next year, but over the last year, I did go through chemotherapy from March 16th through June 29th of this year. Lost all my hair. In fact, on the day I graduated chemo, my daughter brought a big poster that said, "Happy Chemo Graduation Day." And I got a picture taken with all of my nurses and other professionals who helped me over those few months, and it's just been a really interesting time, and I'm lucky that my hair's even coming back at all.
Yeah.
So, but it is No Shave November, and
Yes.
it's the reason we do that now is to focus on men's health.
Yes.
So
Men are often the forgotten dyad.
we don't take very good care of ourselves, I'm told.
No, not at all. It's harder often to get a man to go to the doctor and get regular checkups. And screening, as you know, and I'm sure you can concur on this,
Yes.
is critical. I believe the statistics are something like 1 in 9 men at this point in time develop prostate cancer. The only way to find that out is to go to the doctor and get screened. So it's a critical process.
Get the PSA. And what's interesting about my case, and I've had folks who have talked to me in the past about it, I had a PSA done in 2009, and it was normal. I didn't in 2010, probably should have, given what I'm going through now, because in 2011, it was late 2011, I had my first PSA of the year in December, and my number was 16.7. And at that time, I didn't even know I had the PSA in 2009.
Right.
I had no idea what a PSA even meant. I had no idea at all. And for anybody who does know, 16.7 is quite alarming.
High.
So you won't get a treatment plan based on one PSA.
No.
But the second PSA I had done in January of 2012, it was 20.4.
Yeah. So that's that critical piece because it was rising.
Yeah, the biopsy confirmed it was cancer. And in March of 2012, I had a prostatectomy, had it removed. thinking I would be cancer-free at that point. Turned out I wasn't. Went through radiation for 6 weeks starting, I never forget some of these dates, started August 27th in 2012 and went through 6 weeks of radiation, and then was good for a while. And then in May 2013, my PSA spiked again, and they put me on a hormone therapy, which was working very well. For 2.5 years, my PSA was literally undetectable. And then in late, it was December 15th last year, the nurse, I was coming in to see the doctor, the nurse asked me, she said, "You know your PSA's up?" And I looked at her with some alarm, and I said, "What do you mean? This was, you know, this is supposed to be my last hormone treatment, and I was going to be in remission in 2016. Wasn't the case. PSA in January showed that my numbers were higher, and that's when I had a bone scan and a pelvic CT. Those were clean, so I'm thinking this is all a fluke. The doctors told me it wasn't, and that at that point I sought the help of an oncologist, and then started chemo on March 16th. And every 3 weeks then. And it ended on my daughter's birthday on June 29th.
Yeah, that's a good birthday present for her.
Yeah, it was, but it was tough. I mean, make no mistake, it was tough. But I did find out recently that my PSA has tripled since the last time I had it taken. So I'm not sure where that's going to go with me right now.
Yeah. And again, if we can go back, like starting with it, that was the first sign, was the PSA elevated, right? You didn't feel ill.
No, not at all.
You had no concerns. Now there are items that men can, that should land you at the doctor. Those would be difficulty urinating, pain upon urination, pain with ejaculation, painful sex. There are a lot of items that should land you in the doctor, but again, screening is key because you didn't have any.
And even what you just mentioned, a lot of guys won't go see a doctor because of that.
No, you're right.
And that's the irony, because when I first was checked, when I had the check in 2011, I mean, I was feeling good. I had just lost 30 pounds. I mean, I felt like, nothing could stop me.
Could conquer the world.
And then I'm like, what the hell's a PSA?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget that question. And it's funny, with Google, I learned a whole lot about PSAs within about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But,
another item when we're talking about Men's Health and No Shave Month, testicular cancer is another one. And this one, it tends to be younger men. So even if you're in your 20s and early 20s, that is something, you ever feel a nodule, a lump, an enlargement in one of your testicles, that is critical, again, that you go to the doctor. And again, that's a group of men that probably do not regularly go to see a physician.
No, because they feel good.
Yep, can conquer the world.
Can conquer the world, absolutely.
Yeah, that's not a normal age for men to go and seek a checkup. So again, it's critical that men do their own self-exam for their testicles when they're at that age, and if they feel any lump or bump that they're concerned with, they should go see a physician.
And two, I'm dealing with this right here. It's actually a precancerous condition on my face, because as much as I love the beach,
the beach does not love you.
The beach does not love me, ladies and gentlemen. I went to see a dermatologist in August, head-to-toe check, highly recommended, and she noticed that I had some precancerous conditions on my cheeks and nose. So, in order to get rid of this, there was a facial cream that drew this out, and thank goodness for it. Because it looks like I'll avoid the problems that come with melanoma.
Yes, and we've had our own taxings with this with members of the health division. We have
I know.
We have an individual in the health division that will also talk to you about skin cancer. It is important. You don't let things go. If you're concerned at all, that's the time to go to the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. But we just thought this was a good opportunity with No Shave November. Of course, baby-faced me, I I've lost, I've had some permanent facial hair loss
As part of the
through all
chemo.
this as part of the chemo, but you know, small price to pay, absolutely. Kate, thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Really
I
enjoyed
really
it.
appreciate it.
And for all of us here at CityVision, I'm Mark Murray, and I'll see you around town.